Welcome to Fantasia, home of the Melodious. My name's Azallea, and today, gonna be bringing you guys an update to my deck profile. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. First off, we were playing 3 copies of Aria, the Melodious Diva. Aria provides our Melodious monsters with targeting and battle immunity, so she basically allows us to stall for a few turns while we try to get some bigger monsters out onto the field. She also allows us to slow the pace of the game down without any major threats of being OTK'd. Next off, we play 3 copies of Soprano, the Melodious Songstress. Soprano basically allows us to go into our fusions in our extra deck and without using polymerization, using other Melodious monsters that we control on the field. And she is basically the centerpiece of the deck in terms of making big plays and pushes and creating large boards. Next off, we are playing 3 copies of Sonata, the Melodious Diva. While she's level 3, she is still absolutely necessary in this deck because she combos really well with Soprano in terms of making fusions, but also because when you special summon her, she allows all your fairy-type monsters to gain 500 attack and defense, which makes them pretty big and threatening to your opponent, especially because we don't have to rely on our extra deck to win in this build. Next off, we are playing 2 copies of Cannon, the Melodious Diva. Cannon, I bumped her up from last time just because of the fact that I needed more targets to be able to synergize with Soprano because she can only fuse from the field. So I thought bumping her up to 2 would give me 5 targets, and 5 targets for 3 Soprano is pretty good. And she also allows us to go into rank 4 plays if we have extra copies of level 4 monsters in our hand. So she's really good in that regard as well. Next off, we were playing 1 copy of Opera, the Melodious Diva. We play this because she's cute, and also because she's 2300 attack. So she's a much more reliable monster to be able to put on the field compared to Chopina, although her effect isn't as good. But 2300 is nothing to laugh at, especially if if Sonata's on the field as well. Sonata will boost her up to 2800, which allows her to crash with all the Mega Monarchs and most of the Cosmo monsters as well, bar Dark Destroyer. Okay, so next off we are running 1 copy of Score, the Melodious Diva. Score just allows us to attack over things. It's really fun to do when you summon Opera and they try to beat over her. You just drop a Score, and that's that. Also, you can recover her with Soprano's effect, so it's kind of a recurring Honest, and 1's enough. You don't really need more than 1, mainly because we are also playing 2 copies of Honest. Honest is just an amazing card overall. Have to be running it in this build because we rely so much on our main deck, and our monsters are small compared to more of the meta and more competitive decks. So we have to have a way to be able to beat over them without using our extra deck sometimes. Because going into our extra deck really isn't that good for us in terms of card advantage, but yeah, so Honest helps us in that regard. Next off, finishing off the hand trap lineup, we play 3 copies of Effect Veiler. Took out the 2 Maxis for these 3 Veilers, just because I believe that Veiler's better this format. Maxi's really only good against Burning Abyss or Phantom Knights. Cosmos can kind of play around the Maxi, and Monarchs don't care about Maxi at all, so yeah, this is our monster lineup, and I believe that also Effect Veiler is just so good at stopping plays compared to Maxi, which only discourages plays. But anyway, moving on, we play for our spells 3 copies of First Movement Solo. Very standard in the Melodious deck. You get to special summon 1 level 4 or lower Melodious monster straight from your deck if you control no other monsters. Next off, we are playing 3 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. Mystical Space Typhoon, I took out the Twin Twister and just decided to run the 3rd MST because I didn't really like the discard that I had to do for Twin Twisters, and most of the time there's only 1 or 2 set cards that you really need to be afraid of, unless of course they're playing some Demise builds. If you're going up against Demise decks, then, well, they can't really out your field anyway, so you're pretty good in that regard. Okay, next off, we were playing 2 copies of Magic Planter. Now I know I don't have any actual copies of Magic Planter. They're in the mail right now, but Magic Planter is really good. Basically, what it does is it allows you to send 1 continuous trap from your side of the field to the graveyard, and then you get to draw 2 cards. And since I'm playing a Floodgate version of Melodious, I definitely found use in this in terms of draw power and allowing us to cycle through any of the floodgates that we don't need or we have multiples of or that aren't as effective in the matchup. It's also very good for sending Powerful Rebirth because Powerful Rebirth isn't directly attached to the monster, so if it leaves the field, the monster gets to stay. So that's really good for just clearing up some of your back row as well. Next off, speaking of draw power, we play one copy of Upstart Goblin. Decided to just throw this in because I have it now, and it's not like absolutely necessary. You could play probably a better card in its place, but it just allows us to draw into our floodgates a little faster, increases consistency by just a little bit, which helps. So next off, we are playing one copy of Instant Fusion just to get the Norden plays going. A free rank 4 for 1,000 life points is nothing to laugh at, especially if you're bringing out something like Abyss Dweller to stop Cosmo Ships from floating and all that stuff. He's also one card Lightning, basically, for Instant Fusion, so that's pretty good. Next off, we were running one copy of Soul Charge just to recover any monsters that have been destroyed that we need, rebuild our fields, essentially. And we play one copy of Raigeki, just because this deck has a hard time beating over a lot of monsters that are bigger, and so we need a way to be able to clear them out. That's it for the spell cards, and next off, going into the trap cards. So for the traps, we are starting off with 3 copies of Powerful Rebirth. In my opinion, is really standard in Melodious builds, just because the monsters don't die when Powerful Rebirth is destroyed. So let's say they blind MST or Twin Twister your back row, and one of them's Powerful Rebirth. You can chain it, and then bring back an Aria. Powerful Rebirth gets destroyed, and Aria stays on the field. So it's very, very strong. Very, very strong card. Unlike Call of the Haunted, which will destroy Aria in the process of being destroyed itself. Next off, we are going into Floodgates. 3 copies of Rivalry of Warlords. This card is absolutely crazy in this meta. You can stop Cosmos, you can stop Monarchs, you can stop Burning Abyss from going to Dante's. This card is just absolutely fantastic and almost mandatory at 3 in any rogue deck that is trying to play. Okay, so next off, we are going with 3 copies of Mistake. This deck does not search whatsoever. We only have some draw power in terms of Upstart Goblin and Magic Planter. So 3 Mistake just shuts down a lot of decks. Pantheism, Tenacity don't work. Return of the Monarchs don't work. Cosmos, Tin Can don't work. It just shuts down so many decks. It shuts down Skarms, it shuts down Rhodas, anything that you can imagine that adds anything and searches, they can't do anymore. So it really slows down the state of the game where you can actually start to compete, because now what they have to do is they either have to rely on their draw phase for cards, or they have some recovery cards like Cosmotown or something that can loop some of the resources that they already have, but it just stops them from advancing the game state to the point where you can't recover or compete against them. Bump this up to 3 just because I thought it was necessary, and I cut one bottomless for it, but it's fine. Just play 1 warning as the summon negation, just because that bottomless isn't that good compared to before. So bottomless basically now it gets rid of the monsters that your opponent summon like Erebus or Aether, but it doesn't stop their effects, and their effects are what you need to be able to stop. So Solemn Warning was just enough with that, and then I thought 3 Veilers were pretty good in that regard as well. Just stopping your opponent from doing stuff instead of just reacting to a play that they're doing and then only hindering them slightly. So next off, we're going to go into the side deck. Alright, so starting things off, we are playing 2 copies of Max C. Took these out of the main deck, put them in the side. They're really good against Burning Abyss and things, really shuts them down their plays. So it's still nice to have, and against combo decks like Synchro Fusionist or maybe Synchrons or anything like that just like to go off, side in the Max Cs for those. So next, a new addition to the side deck lineup, we are playing 2 copies of Kaiser Colosseum. Kaiser Colosseum says that basically, when you control a monster on your side of the field, at least one, the opponent cannot control more monsters than you do. And a really cool ruling with this is the reason why I play it is with Stormforth. So if your opponent doesn't have a monster and you have a monster, let's say Aria, they cannot Stormforth your monster and tribute it for something else, because after that resolves, your opponent will control 1 monster and you control 0. So technically, they can't do that because the fact that they'll at the end of the resolution, they'll have more monsters than you, and that isn't allowed under Kaiser Colosseum. It also just allows you to stall. If you have a single aria, right, Burning Abyss can't make XYZs, people can't pendulum summon, so it's just a very, very strong card overall, and I definitely would recommend playing a few copies of them. I didn't play them in the main deck just because I thought it wouldn't hinder all decks. It doesn't always hinder monarchs. Like I said, they can always summon a monster and then tribute it off, and play around it. Okay, so next off we play 2 copies of Prohibition. This card is absolutely insane. So Prohibition, if you don't know what it does, is when you activate the card, declare a card name, and then your opponent cannot activate cards with the same name, basically. So if you're going first and you have a lot of floodgates, you could just activate this and call Twin Twisters or MST, whatever is more suitable for the deck you're playing against, and then your opponent basically can't do anything at that point. They can't get rid of your floodgates. So yeah, call an important card like Pantheism, like Stormforth, and they have to get rid of this before they can start playing their cards. Next off, we were playing 2 copies of Twin Twisters, just more spell and trap removal. I know I said I don't like the discard, but you know, sometimes you can afford to discard an extra monster that you can't normal summon, or the floodgates that are probably breaking your hand up. Okay, so next off, we were playing 2 copies of Curse Seal, the Forbidden Spell. This card is really good against most of the Monarch matchups that you'll be playing, because Monarchs is such a popular deck right now. Basically, you discard 1 spell card to negate the activation of a spell card that your opponent activated, and you destroy it. And then for the rest of the duel, your opponent cannot activate spell cards with the same name. That was destroyed by this card. So if you hit Stormforth, they can't Stormforth you ever for the rest of the game. If you hit Pantheism, they can't play Pantheism. They can still use the graveyard effect, but they can't play Pantheism itself to draw more cards and just boost their consistency and stuff like that. Okay, next up we were playing 1 copy of Vanity's Emptiness, just because it's really good against decks that like to special summon a lot. Really good against Cosmo. If they activate the Pilot's effect to summon a ship, you can chain this and they can't really do anything, and you can turn it off by yourself with Magic Planters if you really needed to go off that turn. Next off, we are playing 1 copy of Soul Drain. Soul Drain is so good against Burning Abyss and Cosmos, stops all the graveyard effects. Also a continuous trap, so Magic Planter synergy. And the last 3 cards, of course, I always play these. 3 copies of Imperial Iron Wall, stops Cosmos and stuff from banishing themselves, stops PK Fire. It's okay against Monarchs, not absolutely necessary. I think I have better cards to side in than this for Monarchs. I like to use Shiberta against them as well. So Imperial Iron Wall is just really strong, and I would side this definitely against Cosmos. It's basically an auto win if they can't get rid of it. So Imperial Iron Wall is also a continuous trap, and again, Magic Planter synergy. And that is it for the side deck. So next off, we're going to go into the extra deck. Alright, so for the extra deck, we are playing 1 copy of Abyss Dweller, just to stop all the graveyard effects from going off. And if you Dweller against Burning Abyss or Cosmo and then drop a Raigeki, you basically just won the game from that point. Okay, so next up we're playing 1 copy of Daigusto Emerald, just to be able to recycle some of the extra deck monsters that I might need in certain matchups. 1 copy of Bujinte Tsukiyomi. So most of the time you're going to have a lot of continuous traps in your hand that you don't want to set to clog up your back row. So if you set most of them and have like 1 or 2 in your hand, you can discard them to draw more cards. That was kind of my reason for running it. Just helps you cycle through. And she also sets up your graveyard if you have like an Aria or something in your hand that you don't want. You set up your graveyard for Powerful Rebirth and stuff like that. Next off, we are playing 1 copy of Fairy Cheer Girl. She is a fairy, so she works under Rivalry, and her effect to let us draw some cards is also very nice. Alright, so next off we are playing 1 copy of Castel, the Sky Blaster Musketeer. Very standard staple in rank 4 decks, just spin something back that's problematic. Next I play 1 copy of Ragna Zero. Ragna Zero, the only reason I really play her is because she is a fairy and she has 2400 attack. So under Rivalry of the Warlord, your opponent's going to have a very, very tough time trying to get out of her. She also gets boosted by Sonata, so she can go up to 2900, 3400, 3900, depending on how many you have on the field. So very strong. Next off, we are running 1 copy of Dark Rebellion XYZ Dragon, just because I thought that this deck had a tougher time getting over some bigger monsters, especially things like Majesty's Fiend and stuff, you could always summon a Dark Rebellion and just run over that without having to waste something like Utopia or Utopia the Lightning for that. So really good, and it's also decent if you're trying to beat over some Cosmos ships. You can maybe target something that like Landwalker or Slip Rider, things that can be targeted, and then you go and attack something like a Dark Destroyer with it. So it's pretty good. One copy of Utopia, because we run one copy of Utopia the Lightning. And basically Daigusto Emeralds here just to be able to recycle Utopia the Lightning. Might recycle Abyss Dweller against some matchups, and Fairy Chirgo and Ragna Zero if they ever get destroyed and I need them again. So, yep, those are the XYZs, and moving into the fusions. To complement our instant fusion, we play one copy of Elder Entity Norden. Just very good for making rank 4 plays. Also, he's a water, so he'll boost your Abyss Dweller to 2200 attack, which is very, very strong against some decks like Burning Abyss, where they don't have any main deck outs to it, essentially. Next off, we play, for fusions, 3 copies of Shuberta, the Melodious Maestra. So Shuberta has an effect that allows us to target 3 cards in either player's graveyard and to banish them. This can happen during either player's turn, so you can banish all the Monarch spells and traps, all the Burning Abyss monsters, Dante's, Beatrice, all that good stuff, so they can't get them back, they can't reuse them. Just an overall really, really strong disruptive card. And yeah, so moving on into the choirs. We play one Bloom Diva, the Melodious Choir. As you all know, Bloom Diva is a very, very powerful card and can basically out anything that was special summoned. So I like to use her against Cosmos. I bumped her down to 1 copy just because I wasn't really needing her in most of my matchups. The meta really calls for Shuberta more often than Bloom Diva. Even against Cosmos, where you can just have a 3000 attack Shuberta that runs into everything until they deplete themselves of Dark Destroyers. So there's that. And the last card in the extra deck, we play 1 copy of Bloom Prima, the Melodious Choir. I never summon her, but she's just here for options, I guess. But one cool interaction, one reason I want to keep her here is because if you have an Honest and you attack into some big monster and drop an Honest, you can attack again into, like, let's say a smaller monster and potentially steal games that way. Her effect to recover things is not terrible. Soprano just does it better. But, you know, being able to attack twice, maybe I'll summon it if my opponent has an open field. It's maybe like the only reason I do that. So she can attack twice and she'll normally be 2500 because she gains 300 for each material that's used. So 1900 plus 300 is 25. Attacking 5000 directly is not bad, but that rarely ever happens. And if the opponent does have an open board like that, you're more likely than not already winning to the point where you don't need to invest all the materials that you have into Bloom Prima. But, you know, she's just there for some options. And I haven't really missed the second Bloom Diva at all. So, yeah, definitely keeping that Bloom Prima in there. You can also recycle these fusions with Soprano's effect. So there's that. So that about does it for our deck profile. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more Melodious content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.